bastards!
Thommy Waite, what is your favourite word?
Fizzy. I think I've always liked the word fizzy because it looks good on the page. It's fun to say. Yeah. I like dizzy as well, but fizzy's just got the edge, so I'll go with fizzy.
You got to go with the F over the D, especially
Hell
as a
yeah.
guy. Yeah. What is your least favourite word?
Systemic. As soon as you hear systemic, you know there's going to be some more bullshit. Or maybe you've been fed some bullshit and the sentences led up to systemic. So systemic is definitely numero uno hate word.
What turns you on?
Good planning. You know, when someone makes a good plan and it's well thought out, they're like, all right, if we leave here now, then we'll have a chance to go get beers before the store closes, and then we can catch the bus here. And it's like, that turns me on because it's kind of like someone can kind of see the future almost, and they're willing to kind of guide you into it. So that kind of turns me on, where it's like, yeah, this guy gets it.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that, actually. I know what you mean. Nothing
maybe
worse than spontaneity.
Yeah, and it's maybe not so much the good planning, it's more the confidence that comes with it, where they've actually kind of they've thought it, but they've kicked the tires inside their own head, and then they're willing to kind of share the plan with you because they've actually done the work instead of doing the work in real time.
Nice. What turns you off?
Yeah, probably poor planning. When people do that, when they think out loud and they kind of drag you into their bullshit of like, well, we could do this and we could do that. It's like, well, this is probably an inside thought. Why are you involving me in that? So that turns me off.
What is your favorite curse word?
So I'm going to be a basic bitch and go for cunt, but I'm going to add an ED on the end. Cunted, which is extremely Australian to signal something that's broken, fucked, dismantled. And I was listening to a podcast with this Australian footballer a couple of months back, and he was talking with an ex-teammate on the podcast, and he was just kind of, shooting the shit with his old friend. And at one point, he was talking about something that occurred during a game. He's like, oh, yeah, and then fucking Jono really cunted me with that handball that came this way. It was like, it really fucking popped off the page. And then later in the interview, he went to say the word shit. He's like, oh, he was about to say shit. And he said, oh, can I say shit? And the guy was like, well, you've already said cunted. So I'm pretty sure, shit, anything's gonna fly at this point. So yeah, cunted is just obscene. So I'm gonna go with that.
I'm assuming you can use that for when you're pissed at your ass as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's got multiple applications. So again, that's why I'm a big fan.
Nice. Just quick pause. Are you a bit laggy, or am I laggy for you?
No, you're not laggy on this end.
No?
I'm getting everything loud and clear. Yeah.
Okay. Well, your voice is fine. The background or your vid is a little bit laggy. It might be all right in the actual but yeah, just say.
Yeah, if it's not good, I'll just turn off the filter. Let me know.
Maybe try that if you're all right with it. And we'll
give me a second. Change background. All right, off.
That's beautiful.
All right, less psychedelic, but more beautiful. Whatever.
In fairness, it hasn't made too much of a difference so far.
Oh, well, no. We'll see.
It looks better. I've always wanted to pitch you in a bedroom, so
Yeah.
What's your favorite drug?
I'm going to have to say alcohol. I think it, yeah, because I could say acid, or I could say, I tried heroin once. That was pretty fun. But I think alcohol has just stood the test of time. So therefore, but you can't argue with numbers in terms of the way you keep crawling back to it. So there's something there, the old faithful.
Yeah, I always wondered if that was like, I think Stanhope brought it up in a gig once when he was just saying, like, I only fucking do it because it's there. You can just get it. If I had to wait around in a stinking parking lot for a 6-pack, I don't think I'd fucking bother. Eat at the bar or whatever. So, but yeah, convenience, it's just laziness, basically.
But then that's chicken or the egg, though, because do you do it because it's everywhere, or is it everywhere because everyone needs it? It's ubiquitous for a reason. Yeah, I've often pondered that, but I think that would be my favorite drug.
Nice. I might come back to you on the heroin thing. I'm intrigued. What sound or noise do you love?
I like involuntary noises. When you get pushed in like the abdomen and you make like a squeak, or like the air expels in a weird way. And every time that happens, it's kind of like the first time that sound was ever made in the history of the world. It's somewhat in the ballpark of like a tennis grunt, but that's kind of a bit more performative. And, there's kind of like a recognizable cadence to that type of sound. I'm talking more about, like I said, you just get pressed in the gut by accident, and it just makes it never not funny, those type of sounds.
I kind of think of female tennis grunts especially was like the gateway drug to porn for me. That was like 8-9 years old watching that, just hearing this thing every other 10-15 seconds. I don't think it did any favors.
No, you definitely feel like there's something. You're like, there's something more there. I'm not 100% sure why that is so. When you're like 8 or 9 years old, you're like, I'm clearly lacking the hardware at this point in time to really fully appreciate what's going on. But there's like an antenna in your head.
There's an antenna going off.
Yeah.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Kind of a basic bitch answer, but probably Christmas carols. So Christmas songs on the radio, when it's like over here, just whenever after Halloween's over, then it starts really fucking early in November. You're like, oh, Jesus Christ, 2 months of this. Yeah.
Monica, Rachel, and Phoebe, fuck, marry, kill.
Yeah, because I listened to the James episode. This is perhaps the one where I was like, thinking, is he going to ask me this? And I had to really kind of ponder it. Phoebe is the kill, which is kind of the obvious choice. But the other two are complicated.
Like the 90 percentile, like literally, like every dude I'm asking this, I think Phoebe's getting the chop.
Yeah, but it gets complicated with the other two because, for example, Courtney Cox, I think she became like Cougar Town Courtney Cox. Did you ever see that one where it was like 10 years after Friends and she was kind of like a MILF? And there's something about her body. It like she got hotter with the plastic. She hit that kind of like she was in a beautiful sweet spot with the plastic surgery where she looked fake as fuck, but it was really hot in kind of like a softcore porn way when she was on Cougar Town. So I like her later. Really thought about this, but then Courtney Cox, when she was younger, she's in the Bruce Springsteen Dancing in the Dark video, and she kind of looks like, I don't know, she looks like an art history student, kind of someone with really annoying opinions.
Ace Ventura as well.
Yeah, So I don't know. I'm probably gonna say fuck Courtney Cox, marry Rachel. Fuck Monica, marry Rachel. Yeah.
Okay. I can live with that. Are you happy with your decision?
Yeah, lock it in. I feel
because I'm always considering like if we're going with the characters of the show, Monica's profession is obviously going to be very beneficial in a marriage. Whereas Rachel,
yeah, no, she was just more annoying. She was more annoying.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, on that subject, what quality do you most admire in a woman?
Quality in a woman. Probably someone who is adventurous. And get your mind out of the gutter, G to the C. Not just that, but yeah, I think just by nature, women are a little bit more conservative and have to protect themselves. And I don't know, maybe I'm a raging misogynist for saying that, stuck in the past, but I think it kind of makes sense. Like, especially as I'm a bit older now, you see kind of like girls go wild and have fun in their 20s, and then and then they get older and settle down and want to protect themselves and all that. But I think that's cool and everything, but there's nothing like someone who's kind of willing to go on adventures with you, and you can kind of meet somewhere in the middle. What is it like when men and women get married, women make a plan to change the man, and a man hopes the woman never changes. And so I think that there's a yin and yang there where you both are kind of working on one another. And I think a successful relationship, there is like you do kind of accommodate one another and grow together. But I like people who are adventurous as well. And I think that kind of brings the best out in myself. So that would be my answer there.
So rather than the bedroom, what you're saying, travel-wise, like kind of wanderlust?
Yeah, lust for life, just doing stuff, like willing to, let's go check out this place, let's go do new things. And I think, I think it's because I've got like a curmudgeon inside of myself who doesn't want to try new things and is happy just to stay in the predetermined groove of my existence. And so I think I need someone who's gonna push me out of my comfort zone a little bit more. And then once I've found someone like that, I can kind of run with it. So I think that's my just a general lust for life.
What book or writer do you love?
Yeah, I guess this kind of comes full circle. I reread The Dice Man recently, and that's actually how I first heard about GC, because I saw your old vid about The Dice Man. It's written by this guy called George Cockcroft, and but he used this device where the main character in the book is the supposed author of the book, Luke Reinhardt. And I reread it. There it is.
There it is. Yeah, in case anyone's interested. It's a fucking fun read.
Classic. Great. So much fun. And the reason I reread it is I stumbled because he died a couple years ago, and he was pretty old. I think he was in his late 80s or 90s, and I guess his death passed me by. I knew it happened, but I didn't really read any of the obituaries or any. But I checked to see if there were any think pieces.
Anything about that.
Yeah, he died a couple of years ago, and so I listened to this. I found this random podcast, which he did it was like 10 years ago, and he started talking about the more kind of like Eastern mysticism, spirituality that he put into the book, which I was vaguely aware of when I read it the first time, but as you're aware, it's such a kind of rollicking, fun, uh, just kind of like a raucous experience. I didn't really pay attention to that, so I kind of went back and I reread it with that more, just trying to pay attention more to that type of stuff. And yeah, it's all in there, just in terms of the ego dissolution stuff and the not being attached to the person you were yesterday or 5 minutes ago. Yeah, so that was cool. It was definitely I hadn't read it for a few years, so it was kind of nice to refamiliarize myself with it. But that's a great book, and it's definitely one of those where it's going to be a linchpin beacon for me for the rest of my life, where I know I'll be able to revisit it and get something out of it, and always aspiring to get somewhere in the ballpark with my own stuff.
Yeah, I can't remember if I mentioned it actually, but now that I think of when I first read it, I was visiting a mate who was working in a bookstore, and he was just in a bit of a mood, and with the company he works for, and he just kind of grabbed this off the shelf and walked outside with me and went and just handed it to me. So daylight robbery, quite literally, which is very suitable for this book actually as well.
Yeah.
And I was reading it in a local park, and I just about 3-4 pages in, I was like, okay, yeah, I get what he means. This is it's already got me hook, line, and sinker kind of thing. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it grabs you quick.
Oh yeah, it's a great read. What book or writer do you hate?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm someone where if something's not doing it for me, I just give up and move on to something else pretty quickly. But one book where I really just, I plodded through and made it to the end but didn't enjoy it was Steinbeck, The Winter of Our Discontent. And yeah, I don't know. That was the second or maybe the third Steinbeck I've read, and I know people love him. But there was just something. I think that was his last book, and maybe it's particularly depressing. That one really rubbed me the wrong way. But yeah, that's rare where I'll actually do that. I felt like some type of obligation. It's also not a really long book, so I was like, oh, you can do this. Just maybe it'll get better. But that one really rubbed me the wrong way. Do you have thoughts on Steinbeck?
Not really. I mean, it's bringing up obligations in school when we were made to read Of Mice and Men and stuff like that. Yeah, and it's not like I was particularly anti it. Like I was more aggrieved when it was like, oh, you've got to read some Jane Austen or some shit like that, or even Dickens, like Great Expectations. It's not. I mean, I do really like the story now, but when I was a teenager, I couldn't give a rat's ass, and it was it was slog. So that's all I really associate with Steinbeck. But I suppose it would make me intrigued to read him again now, just to see what I kind of. But again, I think pretty much all of his stuff is pretty depressing, right? So
from what I can tell as well is that Steinbeck hits a little different for Americans because a lot, his stories are really kind of, there's always the backdrop of some type of like social change or like this, you can juxtapose it with like some shift that's happening culturally. So from what I can tell, Americans seem to get him a bit more, but it's never done it for me. So hate's a strong word, but I And maybe there's some other books that would do it for me, but the ones Steinbeck that I've experienced so far have been not my cup of tea.
Fair enough. Love it. If you could meet any fictional character in real life, who would it be, and what would you do?
I think it would be fun to to go out and have some drinks with Sick Boy from Train Spotting. Just for the kind of like purely observational, seeing how, kind of like observing like a panther walking through the, like a busy city street or something, like just wondering how he's about to dismember, someone. And so I think that would be highly entertaining. Probably prefer the kind of younger sick boy, because Irvin Welsh continues the character until he's middle-aged in the most recent book of his that I read, where Sick Boy appears. It's starting to get a bit sad towards the middle age. So I'd probably say which makes sense, right? It couldn't go any other way. But I'd still go I'd say early Sick Boy would be a fun night.
How would you like to die?
I think a car crash is something that I've thought about. I like to die. I think
in a James Dean kind of way, or in a J.G. Ballard?
No, I just imagine myself getting smashed up in a hatchback or something. It wouldn't be very glamorous, but I just guess. A while ago, I started becoming kind of a bit obsessive with statistics. Like, you start looking about your choices in life and like statistically what's going to happen to you if you get in an airplane. What are the chances of you dying? If you get married, what are the chances of your marriage failing? And cars are fucking dangerous. And so but it's something we do relatively often. And I think it was when I was living in New York and I wasn't in cars very often. And so when I did, upon occasion, catch a taxi or an Uber, it started to freak me out a little bit. But then I kind of like the way I self-soothed with that was kind of like just saying, well, statistically, you might, I don't know, the logic probably doesn't really check out, but I started to just accept my fate almost, where it's like, well, it's if you, with all the actions that you do on a general day throughout the rest of your life, dying in a car is going to be, probably the way you're going to go. So I think I'm just going to say that, because why fight with statistics?
True. Would you, just out of interest, are you driving the car or are you a passenger?
No. If this is my fantasy death, then I'd prefer to be a passenger, just so I could, really? Maybe get a. Yeah, because then there's no responsibility, like at the let's say, so if you're both dead, there's the other family, are the in-laws upset at me because I was driving, it could create some friction down the line. Because if I'm just an innocent bystander, I was just listening to a podcast in the passenger seat, I was nothing to do with me.
You didn't know.
So I'd prefer to be a passenger. Yeah, exactly.
Finally, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Yeah, I'd probably, I'm going to go for a pretty avant-garde answer here. I'd probably just want him to start playing the song Heaven by Talking Heads. I just kind of like just no explanation. Yeah, but just be like, okay, this is, because I think, I'm not, I'll just leave it there. Just play that song and then let's move into the new paradigm.
So no words. You just hold up a hand and be like, and then the beat kicks in.
Yeah, potentially, or maybe I don't know, Pop Idol style. Just wheel a stool appears and he's got an acoustic guitar. Maybe I'm one of the judges. I'm Simon Cowell or something with a scowl on my face, and I can be like, "That was terrible." But then,
so you want God to serenade you?
Yeah, pretty. That's really the root of it. Yeah, you've psychoanalyzed me. I want a because I
just put you in a car crash. Sense. You brutally died and you floated up.
Yeah, I've been his puppet for however many years. Now the roles are reversed. That's I think what I need from him at that moment, or her.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the show, Thommy Waite, author. Still YouTubing as well, or is that on?
Yeah,
I'll be honest. I had a quick peek. I noticed your uploads went from like very, very frequent, putting everyone to shame.
Yeah.
And then I noticed you've had a bit of a break from it.
Yeah, I had a bit of a break. It's just the age-old struggle of finding consistency. And yeah, we can talk about this at length. But yeah, I was doing it pretty regularly, just doing like little monologues last year. Kind of equivalent to the tweets thing I was doing for a similar amount of time, actually. I think I did those tweets for like 9 months, Monday to Friday, religiously, and then I did the same thing with the kind of the monologue podcast. I did that for 9 months, religious. So maybe that is my like limit of that's as far as I can push it, and then I keel over. But like yeah, the channel's still live. Maybe I'll rejuvenate it at some point, but I haven't uploaded in ages.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even going 9 months is admirable, man. I mean, especially every day, coming up with different topics. And it didn't sound, I mean, I know probably it maybe seemed off the cuff to you, but you can kind of tell that you had a theme and it was a thought process put into it. And I felt like you got timed a good story out of it, or just an interesting kind of provocative kind of discussion. But
yeah, I guess so. But
I always thought doing one a week was hard, So one every day.
Well, I guess it's for me comparing apples to oranges though, because like the way I and retreading ground that you spoke about, James, with in terms of you write books. And then you're trying to find a way in which to kind of promote yourself and connect with an audience and connect with other people doing similar stuff. But then it's trying to find a balance where you're doing stuff that's actually going to help and stuff that isn't going to eat up too much of your time. And I guess why I wouldn't compare myself to someone like you is that you've obviously got way more visual skill, you've got way more video editing skill, and you actually put together kind of like mini movies or something. Whereas for me, the podcast I was doing a while ago was similar to this, where it was like, just a conversation over Skype or Zoom, or it was these monologue things where I was just recording to a mic, getting AI to generate a fucking thumbnail and throwing it up, because I was like, I want to find something where it is low effort so I can focus on my time, on my regular life and my writing. Whereas you found a way to kind of like do something more, more intensive in terms of hours and a lot more kind of like skill in terms of figuring out how to do all that shit. So I think like comparing my ones, because I would just record those all in one go, 5 minutes each monologue. That's like for the week, that's like 25-30 minutes. Takes me 15 minutes to do the rest. So in like 45 minutes, I'm done. Whereas with you, I'm guessing 45 minutes, that's just like writing the script of one of your videos or something. So it's I don't think you can't really compare upload consistency with different type of content. And I don't know, I'm still at a loss trying to figure out how the fuck to do all this type of shit. But where are you at with all of this at the moment?
I don't know. I kind of feel like I'm possibly where a lot of people are. Like since COVID, I'm just a bit like I'm in the wilderness a little bit. I don't really know direction to go in. I've experimented with so many things on this. It's become a bit of a farce in of itself. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm so looking forward. I've got a few ideas. I probably will revert back to what I was doing, just talking about books. But I'm probably just going to have a bit of a mix, a mashup kind of channel, really, where it's movies, book reviews, maybe some stuff about writing, which I'm hoping we'll get onto, and the odd video essay when it takes my fancy, really, because those kind of things, yeah, you can't just, think it up and then dish it out, because there's times where you need to know more about the subject you're going on about. So whether it's inspired by a book I've read or whatever, I still need to piece it together, segment it, make sure it flows, try and get good segues, all of that kind of shit. And yeah, that obviously takes quite a bit of time, especially when you're trying to add in different visuals, soundtracks, all of that kind of stuff. Also, I'm trying to stream still, which I still ponder why I'm doing that, really, at times. It's one of the, that's probably my low effort kind of thing. And probably the place I had the most fun, funnily enough, because it's like I don't give a fuck. And it's, I can just chat shit about films and, you know, bullshit I see online and stuff like that. And there's more freedom to that. But I kind of see that as my social element, really, because, you know, it's not exactly like I'm actually out there in the world that much these days. So it's more of a bit of a shits and giggles kind of thing for me. But yeah, it's knowing whether really that's helping whatsoever at times, to be honest. I mean, or if you care whether it is, you know. So yeah, I mean, if we're talking about the dynamics of being an author trying to get an audience, which I guess this is kind of dancing around, it's fucking hard. That's the main thing I would say. So I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, Thommy Waite is the author of Any Day You Can Die, book that came out a few years back now. Yeah,
it was December 2020.
2020. Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Heather was December 2020, and I haven't put out.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, I was December 7, 2020. Yeah. So yeah, it's coming up. It'll be 4 years in December. Fucking hell. Crazy. Yeah.
Shit, no. Fucking hell. It's a great book, by the way. Not just saying that.
Thank you.
Great read. You were working on a sequel, right? Or is that still in the plans? Is that still something you?
Yeah. So that was basically like when I finished the first book, I had an idea of where the characters were going to go next. And so that was I basically, as soon as I finished the first one, I started working on the next one. And I'm not sure if you can relate to this, but I like it when the story is kind of like just slightly out of reach from you, where you feel like you've got the gist of things and you kind of know what needs to happen, point A to B to C, but it's kind of like how you're going to pull it off is a bit of a kind of like a mystery. And so that was kind of like the spirit in which I went into it with. But then I started writing the thing, and I quickly realized with that particular story, I just going to be honest, I didn't feel like I had the chops to pull it off. I didn't like the way in which I was telling the story. It read to me like fucking Tom Clancy or something. I was like, what the fuck am I like an adventure thriller type of thing. Yeah. And which I guess there's like elements of that in the first book as well, but for some, I like the tone of that better than what I was dishing up in the second time around. And so, I guess I'm kind of stubborn, and I persevered for a while. But then I realized, I was like, I don't feel like I can pull this off right now. But when I moved over here, I live in Atlanta now, and I very quickly got an idea for another book. And I don't know if it's kind of like the grass is always greener type of thing when you're unhappy in your current situation. If you're unhappy with your ugly wife, you're like, well, the neighbor looks like a bit of all right. So I was kind of like peering over my fence, my hands down my pants. And then so I quickly figured out another story. And so that's the book I've been working out for the last couple of years. And it kind of worked out in which it's a new story set in Atlanta. It's basically just follows the trials and tribulations of people living in this apartment building. And but I found a way to kind of incorporate some of the characters from the first book back into this one. So I guess I've salvaged some kind of, and it all, hindsight's great because you're like, I've really just kind of cherry picked the most interesting part of the sequel that I, so I can just focus on that and scrap the rest. And maybe I'll get back to the sequel one day. But to answer your question, that's what I've been working on now. Is it's kind of like a book set here, and
Okay.
yeah, that's the big realization that I've had. The first book was about my time being in Colombia, in Medellin, Colombia. It sounds kind of wanky, where it's like place is a character, but it kind of was in the first book, and I realized, I'm inspired by places, new places, and so I'd like to think the next book is kind of like my Atlanta book. So that's what I've been working on.
So you're going to have to move every time you're working on a new novel.
It's going to be fucking annoying. Yeah, I'm going to have to find a way to and I liked what James was saying in terms of creating the fictional city. So maybe that's an option at some point down the road, because can't keep moving around.
Yeah, you can't. It's too expensive. Or being an author's not glamorous enough. Not yet, anyway. Potentially.
No.
I know that sounds great. To be honest, it sounds better to me. I think the sequel may happen still, but it might be one of those things where maybe, to mention Sick Boy, maybe it would be something further down the line where they're actually a lot older, and that could be quite interesting to see how they've changed, and to kind of explore middle age, I suppose, rather than the ages of these young 20-something dudes. So
if you got a window of time, there's a lot more ways in which you can change the characters, as opposed to just picking up where you left off. It's going to be by definition episodic and kind of predictable. So or if you change them too much, it becomes entirely unbelievable. So I like the thing where I've landed on, where they're going to be some of the characters in the first one form a part this second book in a meaningful way. It's not just kind of shoehorned in for the hell of it. I get to tell a separate story. So that's what I've been working on.
I wonder a little bit if that's a curse of a lot of TV series, where you have a really solid 10 episodes where you're kind of learning about the characters and seeing their growth, but then due to popularity, potentially, as it goes on, the characters don't really grow. They just kind of go through motions. So it almost becomes like a sitcom, rather than something that's actually journeying towards anything, if you know what I'm saying. So it's almost like the characters take a kind of a back step toward a story just to keep funneling it out and cash in that cow, basically. But I don't know. I've seen that in quite a few TV series where it just takes a bit of a dip. And that might be just due to not being inspired by it, in the same fashion,
Honestly, I feel like that's why I don't watch any TV anymore. I stick to movies, because I feel like a movie goes for the throat a bit more. It's kind of like, what's the most interesting thing? You've got 90 minutes to 2 hours to pull it off, and then it's done. And there's a finality and a meaningfulness to that. And I guess like you could take like strong examples of like prestige TV, like Mad Men or Breaking Bad, where I would argue that they do have pretty elegant endings, and there's a kind of like a natural progression of the protagonist moving through. However, they can kind of the creators might know where the character is going to end up, but that doesn't mean there won't be fluff and filler in seasons 5 and 6 before they push them to their inevitable fate. So I feel like those two shows maybe did a pretty good job. Breaking Bad, especially. Mad Men, there's a bit of filler towards the end, but I don't watch TV anymore. I watch movies because I'm also relatively busy. I don't have time, but I just, as a form, I find it more interesting right now.
Yeah, I generally do. I mean, I just respect it more. I think it's more difficult to write a standalone screenplay that it needs to, make all of its points, have all of its arcs, its progressions, its point of no returns, all of that malarkey. But also to actually make its point, to do something in 2-3 hours. Which is funny because I think a lot of people nowadays will look at a 2.5 hour film and think, oh, a bit long. But then they binge watch 10 hours of shit where nothing really happens. Yeah. It's kind of the ironic kind of way of looking at things in today's media. But definitely. It's saying that I haven't watched many great films of late. There's been a few here and there. I watched a good one the other day called What You Wish For. I don't know anybody who's watched this yet, but that's it's got Nick Stahl in it. I don't really know him, but I have seen him in something before, and that was quite a tight little movie. I thought pretty good progression in it, tension, pacing. You can tell it's not got the biggest budget, but it does the best with what it has. The only thing I think might work against it is I'm not sure if you're muted, by the way.
Yeah, I think I did that by accident.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I thought worked against it is it has similar themes to like The Menu and a few other cuisine-based types things with chefs and whatnot, which is maybe a shame, but it might be the only reason it got made at the same time. So it's one of those things. You can keep that out of your mind. Then I think most people would enjoy that.
As I've been writing my second novel, I've been kind of self-educating myself about story structure. And I went to university. I did the most generic communication studies degree, and I majored in English and creative writing. So I basically did all the creative writing, film, anything to do with kind of film analysis or reading books, watching movies. I did it all. And essentially they all boiled down to the same thing, where kind of like what you were saying about the Dickens novels at schools. They're like, here's a book we think is important. Read it, and then talk about the themes. Essentially was the nuts and bolts of every single class. And that was okay. It was better than other shit that I wasn't interested in. I could have been studying. However, it boiled down to 10 people sitting around, and the tutor, the lecturer, just kind of like, here's what I think about this, or yeah, I could see that, or more often than not, you'd read some other popular essay from some other person who'd written, and that was the expected interpretation of this so-called important book. And at the time I was like, okay, this is good for me. This is going to help me grow as a writer. It did to a certain extent, but in retrospect, I've realized I wanted to be a creative writer. I actually wanted to construct stories myself. So I read a bunch, and I watched a bunch of movies, but I didn't really kind of understand the kind of like, I didn't perform surgery on the books in terms of like, how are they actually pulling this off? And so, when I wrote my first book, it was more kind of like from an instinctual, you're just trying to guess. You're like, I don't want to write formulaic stories either. But when I look back on my first book, I think the first half is like kind of like a slice of life hang, almost like a rum diary, just hanging out in a foreign place. And then the second half is more kind of a thriller, crime story. And so I guess with the second one, I wanted to challenge myself a bit more. I think the things that I'm drawn to, it's going to be situations where it's interesting characters just hanging out and talking, like a Tarantino or a Richard Linklater movie. That's what I'm drawn to. But I wanted to have a bit more kind of a coherent through line of like, is there a dilemma at the beginning for the protagonist? Is there enough conflict? Is there enough escalating tension? And, those things where it's like, I wanted to actually put more attention into this second book, because I'm confident I can still, bring my own style to it, but I feel like it will just have more of a punch. Like you're saying, if you're going to create a standalone piece, you want something that's actually going to like enthrall the reader without even, without it being so obvious what you're doing, schlocky, moving from the different plot points. So anyway, I discovered this YouTube channel called Film Courage, and it's got hundreds of interviews with Hollywood script writers, script coaches, producers, and there's to be honest, a lot of shit, but there's some real nuggets of gold in there in terms of people talking about how to create good stories. And so I feel like I'm doing the degree that I never did. I should have done, but that wasn't offered, and it's been really eye-opening, because I feel like now when I watch something, I can actually figure out the moving parts a bit quicker and actually understand how the story is working. Whereas before, it was more just kind of an intangible, yeah, I like this, I like certain elements. So but anyway, that's what I've been doing, and it's been hugely helpful for me, because I feel like I'm able to write. I can still do that thing, as I was mentioning before, where it's slightly out of your reach, where you feel like you can kind of improvise and just see what happens, see what the characters say while you're writing, but you're just a bit more confident that you've created a skeleton that makes sense for your story.
Yeah, I mean, with Fubar, the first novel, I actually found like the character would often get away from me. I just kind of, it's like I was letting him run amok and doing all the fucked up shit he was doing. It was almost like it kind of felt like I needed to do that at the same time, because it was like I need to figure out where I can, or how I can insist on the conflict. And when I kind of realized that it's more of a novel about man versus himself, so it's like you got man versus other people or the world or whatever, but really it's a very interior stream of consciousness. So I kind of felt, well, most of the conflict's coming from his own mental failings, basically. And that's when I could kind of, and I just started to up the stakes, really. If something bad was happening, I just thought I need to make it worse. Pretty much every time go on there, it was like a game of like, I don't know, Tom and Jerry sadomasochistic kind of shit, where it was constantly like, it was giving me a headache, but then I was making sure that I was giving it to the character as well. So it was all a bit of a mental breakdown kind of process, which seems to be a running theme in a lot of things I put together, which might be telling me something. But I kind of think a lot of it is pretty mentally ill in general, especially when you're coming up with your own fantasy worlds and characters and whatnot. You kind of definitely, it walks that line basically quite often, and staying on that tightrope isn't always the easiest thing to do. So, I mean, we could, as we were talking about, trying to build yourself as an author, is there any quick tips you'd want to fire out now, and then we can talk more about what your just writing process is? This is something I wanted to ask James Flynn, actually, but we didn't get around to it. I was just kind of intrigued to, I think, hearing other people's daily process, if it is that, what their rituals may be. I think it's interesting, if not potentially helpful at the same time.
Yeah, I guess my writing process is pretty simple in that I try and do an hour sprint in the morning generally. I feel like I've got fresher, better ideas in the morning. And so that's my kind of actually putting words on the page. And yeah, I use a timer. I try and focus on it for 60 minutes and, put my phone on silent and not look at anything else. And I do that. And I'm pretty consistent with that. And yeah, I feel guilty if it doesn't happen. I generally just do it Monday to Friday, because on the weekends I'm busy family stuff. But yeah, that's kind of like putting the words on the page. But then I also, when I'm exercising or I'm doing something else, then that's kind of the thinking kind of writing stuff that's happening. That's like kicking the tires on the story itself, because I've made the mistake with this book that I'm currently writing. And I think like what Stephen King says, that like notepads are the place where ideas go to die or something, where if you just park yourself in front of your notepad or your computer and you don't write with direction and purpose, then you can fill the page, but it's useless fluff. And so I find that like the actual kind of pondering the different elements of the story, and like it's often when I'm in the shower, I have the breakthrough. I'm like, oh fuck, that's what I need to do. You know, that I need to this character comes in now, and then that solves this other problem, which has just been low key annoying the fuck out of me. It's been hovering in the background. You know that what you're working on is not working. So you just kind of have to wait by. It's like fishing. You just got to keep throwing your fucking rod in the water and trust it that you're gonna be like, I will figure out the solution to this. So yeah, I generally find that if I'm doing that hour in the morning, then I solve those breakthroughs a bit quicker, because I feel like when I'm
I don't know what, it's almost like it's like you get the joy of the realization of what you need to do, and then it's quickly followed by the dread of what you're going to have to fucking comb through in your so far to make it work. And then you're filled with that paranoia of like, maybe there's one line that's going to give some wrong bit of information and it's going to fuck up the whole thing. But yeah, it's sometimes you just know that is going to be the solution, and it's like no question of it. And then you just have to go through the slog of actually combing through your script and deleting paragraphs and chapters and starting from different points. Like one thing I read in one book I've got on writing here is most of the time your first draft, in the middle of it, that's where your story starts. A lot of the time you think it starts somewhere, like, it's a guy in a bar sitting there having a drink. The most boring shit you can imagine. In a weird way, I just think the more I do it, the more I kind of start to realize, like, the first draft means fucking nothing. It's almost like the background kind of thing of like, it gets it going, but a lot of the time it's actually showing me like, no, this isn't original, but what are you trying to say with it? And there's like literally 5 lines where it's like, that's it. That's what you want to do. Forget that. The 5K you've written, get rid of it. And then start with that. And then, but normally, weirdly enough, I find the tone is set then as well. So it's almost like you have to kind of really, it's almost like building houses of cards in a sense until you can find that one area that's just perfectly symmetrical or whatever you want to look at it. And that's the bit you actually want. So you have to fuck off all the rest. And again, it's painful. It's a pain in the arse as well. Do you have a word count?
No, I don't fuck with that. I used to do that, but I felt like I was just I was trying to be I was just a word whore. I was just cranking it out for the sake of it. Lots of 4-letter words to try and get my word count. No, I don't fuck with that, because I feel like it's counterproductive. You end up artificially enhancing it so you can feel good that you got 500 words down. But if it's 500 words of shit, what's the point? So some days it's slow, some days it's quicker. But what you said before is really true about, your story might start in the middle. Some of the best advice I've picked up was 4 words: start, arrive late, leave early with scenes. So, don't fuck around like, hi, I let him through the door, and, just get in and get out the most interesting stuff, and you can apply that to the story in general. And I think another thing I wanted to touch on, what based off what you mentioned, was those realizations where you think you've solved it. You can really kneecap yourself by, is that the right expression? Handicap, kneecap yourself? Am I going crazy? But you can cunted yourself in the past tense. When you think you've caught the fish, right? You're like, finally, I've got the fucking fish I need to solve the other problem. You can very quickly say, oh, but this is probably not the right fish, or, I've got all these other problems to solve. But I heard Jerry Seinfeld say once, where he's like, That's why you don't edit on the same day. You write something and then you sleep on it, because you need to go to bed. You need to sleep on it so you actually have some distance from it. But you have to give yourself, like, if you've done the work of getting an original idea down, you give yourself the pat on the back by saying you've done a good job and it's going to be fine. And then tomorrow you edit. So it's good advice as well, because I think you need to kind of give yourself those small rewards as you're working through a big project. And
yeah.
I
mean, I suppose, well, what you were talking about, the get in, get out kind of thing when it comes to scenes, I kind of reminded me of the Hemingway thing of like stopping mid-sentence as you just before you call it a day. You just literally stop in mid. So when you go back to it, you can just carry on straight away. And I don't follow this to the T, but there's a kind of sense where if it's on the next section and I'm feeling the flow, I don't even give a shit what I've written that much. It's more that I'm seeing it starting to mold into something else, and usually that's when I'll go, okay, that's it for now, because now the tone's switching just slightly, and I'd rather come into that later. And I quite often, like, I might have an idea for a bit and I like it quite a bit, but I also know I need to be in a certain mood for it. So it's like I need to be in the more, maybe I even need to be hungover writing that bit, because I don't want the critic voice there. So I just need to be feeling a bit shit about myself and the world, and that's when I can just be like, fuck, and then I'm not thinking about it.
Yeah.
So it's not a method I recommend to many people, mostly. But yeah, there's definitely times where the mood just takes you. And I think also rewarding yourself by letting yourself not touch it sometimes as well is just like, just leave it alone for a little bit. You don't have to be like an over attentive or like a helicopter parent to your own script. You just want to kind of fly away and do something else, go and work out, or go and, get your gym session in or whatever. And I kind of feel like these, because I think mostly to keep your own mentality in check or in balance. It's kind of like, for me, it's like you kind of need that. Otherwise you get too obsessive. The obsessive thing will come when you're trying to finalize it. So you might as well keep that train at bay, I would say. Yeah. When you really feel like you're finalizing it, I find that's when you want to be proofing it and doing all of that stuff. And that's just an arduous task, to say the least. So, yeah.
Yeah. What you said before in terms of, how to build an audience and, how to get your book in front of people. First of all, there's plenty of other people you could ask, but I guess
I'd say
the one thing
get fucking lucky. That's the first.
Yeah. Well, what I was gonna say is get zeitgeisty. Go, like, find something, like, because I think about I think this has always occurred with books. You can go back to the 90s with like Train Spotting and American Psycho. Both, like, there was something happening in the ether which both tapped into the, Wall Street dickheads. Greed is good. That's what American Psycho was. That filled the literary void that capitalism needed. And so therefore it, just generates this insane buzz. And Train Spotting, similar thing, kind of like the rave heroin culture, that there was something going on in the air that, people wanted to read a book about that. And so I feel like I've always kind of, I don't think I've reverse engineered my stories trying to, like, all right, what's the next big thing, like rubbing my hands together. But I have been interested in those type of stories because it does feel like you're not just writing about, those writers weren't writing about just select people. They're writing about a generation of people also, like it applies to a lot of people, and there's like there's more weight to those type of stories. So I've always been drawn to those. And I guess like with Any Day You Can Die, I was trying to do something similar with digital nomads in terms of people fucking off, saying I'm sick of, dealing with shit in the supposed first world. I'm gonna, throw a Hail Mary and go somewhere else. And I think my timing was a little bit off with that, because COVID came, and then a lot of people, their lives got progressively even worse wherever they were living. And then they thought, "I'll fuck off." And the thing that I feel like I've missed the boat on by a couple of years was the whole kind of passport bros phenomenon, where guys were just, I'm sick of like dealing with these kind of stuck up Western women. I'm gonna go to the Philippines or Colombia, and so I feel like my book is kind of like in the ballpark, touching on those zeitgeisty things that are happening in the ether, but it didn't work for me because the kind of wholesome digital nomads on YouTube or Instagram don't want to touch my filthy fucking sex and drug filled book because that doesn't fit their brand. And then the kind of the supposedly red pilled passport bros, they don't want to touch it either because I'm making fun of those dudes in the book. So I was like in the ballpark, but very much in no man's land. And anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up is that like I still think the even though the media landscape is incredibly fragmented, I still think that there exist opportunities for kind of zeitgeist books to kind of break through and touch a lot of different people. And like, the two that
might have made that more. If you sat on Any Day You Can Die, do you think you might have merged the passport bros red pill thing with the digital self-improvement session?
Yeah, for sure. Like I'm happy with it, and this, it's weird. It's kind of like I'm happy with it, but I'm also not. I'm just glad it's behind me. I feel like it was, the book you have to, kind of like you were saying about Fuba, you just feel like there's something you need to purge from yourself or something. And so a part of me does think like, oh, I'm a better writer now. I could have done a better job, but I'm also like, well, that's just what had to happen. So you got to move on. So for sure, I guess I'm conscious of it moving forward, but I feel like there's the two books that stand out for me that have created some type of like buzz on literary Twitter that have come out of the last 5 years was this book called Fuckboy by Sean Thor Conroe, who is like this young writer based out of New York, and that gained some notoriety because it was like talking about very specifically millennial, elder millennial type of things in terms of like being broke in a big city, taking like using modern slang and
I don't know. I have heard about this. I don't know much about it, but yeah, I'm intrigued.
That created a buzz because it was kind of like the people saying this isn't literature, and then other people being like, no, this is the new literature, So I didn't read the book, so I can't tell. Okay. And there was another one recently. Okay,
I'll be honest. I think the one person I saw talking about it said it was a load of shit. So
yeah. Well, that was to be honest, the most common consensus. But I guess my point is that whether it was good nor bad, it was that it got enough people interested in its so
that's the battle. So really, I would argue.
Yeah, that's the alchemy of it, where it's like I'm not going to just pick something. I'm not just going to go like, well, I nearly got it with Passport Bros in book one. Now I'm going to go, I'm just going to figure out what's trending on Twitter and write my next novel. I'm not going to do that. But I think I'm drawn to those kind of bigger type of stories where you can kind of like, there's something in the air that you're trying to comment on as opposed to just personal stories amongst a group of people. So.
Oh, for sure. Like I definitely noticed
that would be my advice.
Well, first point is just that I've kind of noticed it more in what I'm intrigued by. So I've got stories that are called like FaceTimer. One I've renamed Source, and they're all kind of little hints at internet discourse, essentially. But in terms of trying to find something bigger, I agree with the zeitgeisty kind of way of looking at things. I just think it's almost like you're trying to be of a time and place before the time and place has forgotten it, and at the same time before it's happened, essentially, as well. It's almost like you have to be slightly ahead, seeing what's going on, and then as it grows in popularity, it's similar in the way you still see the odd meme where you're kind of like, but it's so old now that it's kind of weird to see it. You know, it's like seeing the cheating guy doing the wolf whistle behind his back or something like that, or the black dude kind of thing, like think about it kind of thing. But like, still, when you see it, you're kind of like, yeah, you just remember, it's like, how old is that now, kind of thing. And the trick, I think, maybe what's tricky nowadays is getting on something like a subject of what's going on. Say it's like maybe AI girlfriends and this passport bros. There could be some sort of merging thing there. You could even have something to do with transgenderism, especially if they're going to Thailand, let's say, to passport Max or whatever you want to call it, and things like that. There could be, and especially because that would be more in line with the times. So there could be an interesting story, for sure. Like, and it almost surprises me that there aren't more coming out and just making a big impact. But I think that probably proves how difficult it is to find the right mark, especially with publishing the way it is today. I'd say in a lot of ways you're probably better off being a self-published author in this regard. You do have more freedom to express what you want to say. It's just the burden of making people interested in it is all on you, and if you've got a marketing team or whatever. But yeah, making that happen is very difficult, and in a lot of ways you're better off going completely against form and structure and reason and just doing it almost as if it's the first time you've ever put pen to paper, in a sense, to because there's so much. When I see things online, people misspell words on purposely on TikTok or mispronounce them and things like that because it engages that kind of rage click in comments and stuff like that. People get irate about it, and then, I mean, if you really played into this kind of thing, you could probably create something that could definitely cause a bit of a stir. And if you can get that, you don't really have to do anything else after that, especially if it picks up in the kind of hype and hysteria that is social media these days. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's so many things that you could do. But there is one, I'm going to forget the title of it now, but there's one that's kind of got my eye. I'll see if I think I've got it on my Amazon wish list or some shit.
Just while you're pulling that up, another thing that I think can help you is if you're politically minded, I think that can be hugely advantageous. I would consider myself a very apolitical person. I like sports as opposed to religion, politics. And so, therefore, if you do have like a political angle with something, and it kind of doesn't really matter which team, I think you're already kind of mobbed up, and you've already got people who are already going to be agreeable to the stuff you're writing about, because it's pretty intense, the culture war stuff, at least online. I don't think it really is in the real world, but if you're trying to sell books, what happens on the internet is more important than what's happening in the real world. So I think, yeah, if you've got a political angle and you want to garner some attention, then double down on that. There's this podcast, two American guys, they're called the New Right, NEWWRITE. And yeah, they're kind of like moderately right wing, and they talk about some interesting books. And I think to myself, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess if I was right wing, this would be my kind of team, and that would, you'd have kind of some inbuilt audience there. But yeah, if you're apolitical, it's kind of like a struggle because you're kind of like, again, in no man's land.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'd say I'm the same really when it comes to political. I almost think it's pretty much redundant these days, just because it's definitely become more and more just like a kind of playground competition.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just feels like it's all a bit puppetry to me. It's all for show, and maybe it always was, in a regard, but it just feels a little bit like everything is pretty much right wing when you have a system that is just totally neoliberal and whatnot.
Oh.
And whilst there is a degree of freedom within that, it's it's already pretty apolitical, I would say, in its.
Oh yeah, like I've always been kind of like traditionally I was pretty moderate, and I'd be like on each issue I would have, some type of opinion. I'd be like, oh, I guess I probably lean right here, or I lean left on depending on the issue. But I had this kind of watershed moment when I watched Mark Zuckerberg when he went in front of US Congress like 6 or 7 years ago now, whenever it was, where they were talking about breaking up the Facebook and Amazon monopoly on online commerce, and the old senator dudes just didn't understand the Facebook business model, just asking Mark Zuckerberg straight up, so if you don't charge people to sign up to Facebook, how do you guys make money? Mark Zuckerberg looks at him like he's fucking stupid and said, we sell ads. And I was like, okay, so you're trying to tell me that there's power with these old guys. Like, who holds the power here? Is it Mark Zuckerberg or is it these? It's like they've been bought and sold. And so that was kind of like a moment for me. I was like, I'm not going to bother myself with this shit anymore. The big business runs the world, and that, you can get your knickers in a twist about that and get really upset about it. But I don't think marching with a pussy hat on my head is going to fucking change a thing about that. I don't think Mark Zuckerberg is going to slow down at all.
I don't even think most people even really care that much as well. It's much more about appearing that you care. So it's all about getting that pussy hat on for your Instagram reel. It's much more a vanity project than it is anything else. That book I was thinking of is called Negative Space.
Okay.
And I think it might even be YA technically, but I don't know. Something about, a certain book, you hear of a book and then someone describes it. It's B.R. Yeager, the author is.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that. Yeah. The author name's familiar. Yeah.
But yeah, so it had similar vibes to what you were saying about that fuckboy, but potentially with, I think, normal types of prose. But it's kind of talking about maybe Gen Z a bit more is the focus of it, and of growing up with, iPhones and social media and having tablets in your hand at 3 years old and things like that, and what that's kind of done to a whole generation of kids, which potentially could be very good. But that would definitely be a kind of zeitgeist thing, I would imagine. I mean, I suppose fuckboy that's given me Welsh vibes quite a bit, possibly because of his character choice names, but it's also got a bit of that transgressive edge, so.
Yeah, I think that's what they were hoping for it to be, kind of like to be a new Train Spotting or American Psycho. So it's something that's kind of like going to be shocking. But from what I've read about it, it's more just kind of the mundanity and the listlessness of gig economy millennial existence, where you're on your phone, you're trying to get laid, but you just no one on Tinder's responding. Like that type of general malaise. Whereas I think those other books, they definitely have some existential malaise in them, but they're more explosive in the, gratuitous violence and the kind of like, just things actually happening in society. And I think that's maybe a challenge with modern, if you're trying to capture a modern book, is that we are all fragmented. We're all separated from one another in our little cells. and communicating like this. So how do you write a book where people are in the same room doing stuff? And that's why I landed on for this new book I'm writing of, it's people who exist all in one building, like a communal living space, they call them here, where there's like a shared gym in the building and there's like a pool and stuff like that. So there's like actually forced interaction, because I was like, how the fuck am I going to write a story where people are, apart from your immediate family, how are people interacting? And I didn't really want to write a workplace type of thing. So because everyone's kind of in their own little world.
Don't have much to add on this, but I remember hearing it's a Sam Vaknin, who's like this psychologist dude who does quite a lot about narcissism and all that. But it was kind of this brief aside where you're kind of describing this like condo building area in Canada somewhere, but it's almost as if everyone is so secluded from one another. People are starting to like apologize if they bump into them in the hallway, like, because it's literally that segmented that people are just constantly like, they don't want to intrude upon each other whatsoever. And then this other bit where this kid was, I mean, I think he was probably late teens, maybe early 20s, but he was writing about how he couldn't wait until sex robots got their act together and were just available already, because then that was some way of, essentially him getting his rocks off without having to worry about trying to get an actual human being girlfriend. And it's almost like there's this blind spot in the way he was describing it, because it just seemed very much like this was the answer. And I suppose if we're to delve into sex robots as a subject, I always come back kind of thinking, well, this has already been done, really. Pygmalion was, the whole statue, being chiseled, made. Like it's very similar, and I don't know whether there's a kind of, maybe you could take inspiration from something like that, but it still feels like it's been done already in a lot of ways. And the things that we're actually creating, inverted commas, through new technology kind of feels like it's just fulfilling fantasies of the past a lot of the time, trying to make them like in a new reality, if you know what I mean. So it's like using virtual reality to create fantasies that we've had since the Garden of Eden, essentially. And you just kind of wonder, like, where we go from there. If we do fulfill these things, we're just going to be, sitting around in our underpants with a, thing over our eyes, drooling, because we're getting everything fed into us through a drip. And some little, I don't know, fuck box that we can use that in our looks like, every woman we've ever fantasized about at the same time.
But I think that, that's what I was going to get to, is that I think that like, what if you are going to try and set something in the modern world, you got to bring those. Story is fundamentally satisfying. At least it is to me. Like it could be I don't know. I think about even movies like Dazed and Confused, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm like, people said there's no plot. It's like, well, there's still plot. There's still people moving from point A to point B, and it's like it's not a fucking Jason Bourne movie, but it's there's still stuff happening. And and then at the end of fucking Dazed and Confused, when the kid has that crazy night, he gets home and he puts on his headphones and he listens to Foghat or whatever it is, then you're like, oh, that makes sense. You kind of like, you leave it with like a sense of kind of like pleasure, because you're like, that, I don't know, that this, as opposed to a film where it doesn't make sense, you're like, that didn't stick the landing. That kind of doesn't make sense. So I feel like if you just solely focus on, going on Google or God forbid, asking Chat GPT, what are some topics for a zeitgeisty novel I could write? Then you're going to just be taking random facets of life.
Me. Write about me, bitch. I
Yeah,
am
exactly.
you know.
I'm the writer, the protagonist, the editor, the
I am your future
publisher. I'm everything.
storytelling. I mean, there's definitely probably something that will be done with that. I think there was even a South Park where Trey Parker was taking the piss with one section saying this is literally written by ChatGPT. This is what they came up with, and they actually animated it, and it's just trash, pure, like, as you'd expect. But I suppose with South Park, it kind of, the satirical absurdity can kind of work. But yeah, I don't really know. I suppose I take facets, or at least like I'm intrigued to know just the effect of something like FaceTiming, for instance. Like, what does that do to you? So if you could only interact like this, would you still just feel very isolated and like you're losing your fucking mind, basically? Because I kind of feel like you would if this was your only source of interaction, because it's like it gives you this idea of it, but you don't really get any biological sense of it. So it's almost like it's like an advert of it in a way. So if everything you get, if your sex is all on screen, and and maybe you see food, but you only take it in tablet form or something because they create something to give you all your nutrients and whatnot. It's kind of Brave New World in a lot of ways. It's like taking the pill to deal with this supposedly perfect environment, but everything in it's got no moral, foundation anymore. It's just like everything is very scientifically decided rather than morally or in the terms of any sort of principle or well-being sense. It's more like the imagination bad, just do the thing that's supposed to be better. And we can just multiply through genetic superiority and things like that. We don't need to worry about gestation. I don't know. I mean, even talking about this, I just find like a lot of these stories have been done, not admittedly very well. Gattaca, for instance, but yeah, they've been around for a lot longer than what social media has been, and a lot, more before that, I would argue. So it's weird, isn't it? It's almost like you're trying to make a commentary, I suppose, out of the times we're living in, and yet we're living in the fumble kind of area of like, we feel like technology is great, but it's still a bit shit in a lot of ways. It hasn't quite, we don't have flying cars, and it doesn't look like we're anywhere near that kind of development. We don't have robots, do we? I mean, there's ones that we can self-serve our own food at the checkout. Great. It's like, what fucking good is that? Used to get some other dickhead to do that. Now I'm doing it like a chump. It's what benefit that? It's got me doing the work, essentially. It's genius on the supermarket side, because it's like, why do we want someone at a till doing nothing, serving these arseholes, when the arseholes can serve themselves and we can get 80% less staff?
Yeah, I guess, I agree with the fact that these, I guess, stories or these kind of situations are maybe not new. Just it's a cycle that's been repeating. But I have to admit, it does feel a bit like a end game type of threshold has been crossed recently, maybe post-COVID world, where things are a little bit more sense of desperate. There's like a kind of like a resignation coupled with desperation in the air. So that is worrying, I guess, because you're like, I feel like this is uncharted territory. But then perhaps everyone felt that. Maybe that's why these stories were written in the past, because it was like, this feels scary. And I also I have to admit, I feel like a hypocrite, because I feel like the writer personality type is someone who's kind of wants to be the Sigma lone wolf, stick to myself. Irvin Welsh described it pretty well once, where he says, you got to be comfortable being a loner as well as an extrovert, because you're an extrovert to put yourself out into the world and like observe what's going on. Not afraid to make a fool of yourself in kind of pursuit of understanding what the fuck is going on, but then also equally capable of going in your hidey hole and cranking something out for months at a time and not seeing that many people. So I feel like that I definitely fit into that category where I'm like perfectly comfortable by myself and I don't mind solitude, but so I kind of look out in the world and go, oh, there's lots of lonely people and people living amongst themselves. And I'm kind of like, I wish people would be a bit more, there would be more kind of like just shared interaction, shared experiences, but I don't want to do it though. The other people can do it. But I want to keep, yeah. So that's extremely hypocritical where I'm wanting others to be more social, but I'm not willing to do it myself.
Well, I think my dream would be to, lock myself away for 6 to 9 months whilst I'm working on a piece. But when I emerge, that's when that's when all the money will flood down and I'll be like, oh, I can go and visit all the places I want to see and get fucking shit-faced and, not have a care in the world. But yeah, the reality is that I'm still skint. So that's not going to happen. So I have to get more and more used to solitude and isolation and try and just balance it out with the occasional venture. And
but I get my question
as a writer.
My question for you about the promotional content stuff is, I guess I stopped doing my podcast because it's paused at the moment because I had this realization. I was like, if let's say best case scenario, out of nowhere, this thing takes off and my YouTube channel becomes like a number one thing. And so like on paper, that's success, but it's so much success that it becomes a fucking full-time venture where I have to put more time and effort into it. And I won't, because I've got other responsibilities in my life I need to take care of. I have to devote myself fully to this like supposedly successful thing. And I have to stop writing my book. Would I be okay with that? And I realized I wouldn't. I would prefer to keep writing my book in obscurity. And then when the time is right, get the book out, promote it as best I can, and then work on my next one. And so that's kind of, and that kind of informed to me. I was like, well, I could just keep toiling away and, just keep showing up, being consistent, or I could take that time and energy, admittedly. And that was also the problem with the low effort thing, where it's like, at least with your stuff, as I was mentioning before, there's like a craft there. There's like, there must be a sense of satisfaction once you like do the script and then record your stuff and then edit it. And then, it's a standalone thing. Whereas if you've just recorded a monologue about like you would in a bar, it feels just so like frivolous and kind of like, well, what was even the point of doing that at all? Even though it was only 45 minutes to an hour of my time this week, I don't want the burden of even, if I'm not putting any effort in, why not put more effort into the thing I really care about? And then hopefully pie in the sky dream that you write a book that does become really popular. And then hopefully at that point, the opportunities will arise for you to kind of like capture and build an audience. And so I guess I've just got, that's my perspective. What's yours? I'm really curious about how do you balance it?
Well, I mean, firstly, I'd want to say that most of the satisfaction derived from it ends the minute you hit upload, and then it's like, oh, okay, now what? So yeah. And it's a very thankless thing, and I think that's probably true for however much effort you're putting in, whether it's low or absurdly high or whatever. It's pretty thankless. YouTube aren't sending you any like well dones or money, for instance, unless you do happen to hit the algorithm and whatnot. I suppose for me now, when I look back, or when I try to assess things, I'm definitely on the same wavelength as you. Like, when I'm going to be finalizing my next piece, that will take precedence, and it already is, really. That's what I'm working on every day, and the other stuff is a kind of an aside that I try to do. I try not to put too much importance into the videos I make, but I do struggle with that because, yeah, I tend to, like, if I'm gonna make it, I want to put the most effort I can into it. And yeah, I suppose nowadays I kind of look at it almost like a portfolio of stuff that I put together, and that's why I'm quite frivolous with, if I delete stuff, I'm just like, yeah, because I don't think it meets the standard that I want to hit, basically. And I'll be far happier if I've just got, a whole range of videos maybe at some point, and I just think, well, if I can watch one of these in 5 years, 10 years, and still think, yeah, that's still actually pretty good. That's what I'm trying to aim for, basically. And it's the same with my books, I guess, in a lot of ways. I want to be able to read back on some of them and still think, yeah, you know what, this is actually pretty good. It's got something. It's not, I'd probably make little tweaks and stuff like that, but no piece of art is ever finished, is it? It's just, you just abandon it at some point. And yeah, so it's really just for my own purposes. I want it to meet a standard that I put toward it. Doesn't always happen, and sometimes, yeah, people seem to prefer things where you put fuck all effort into it, and that's always a bit perplexing. But then I suppose it's trying to figure out this whole artistic game in a lot of ways, because I think sometimes not caring as much, it can be beneficial and things like that. So maybe you're being more honest, or maybe you're getting onto something where it is truer, whatever that means. In terms of it trying to build an audience, I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like I'm still known as a fucking book reviewer, even though I haven't reviewed a book for yonks. So it's a bit like you kind of getting stuck into your own typecasting after a while if you start out one way. And then it's like, well, I've never really seen myself as that. I just thought it was a way of talking about books that I don't think are getting enough attention, or or mainly I just don't have anyone to talk to about with. So I just end up doing it in front of a camera. And if that resonated, then great. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, in terms of actually building an audience, I mean, what I'd recommend is probably the opposite of what I do. As a writer, you're probably better off making vids about writing and giving hints and tips, and as if you know what you're talking about. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I mean, it's still something that would possibly intrigue more people to read it, given enough time. I see a few people out there. Pursuit of Wonder is a YouTube channel that delves into quite a lot of philosophical kind of things. And he writes similar stories. So the book almost matches the aesthetic of the videos, but I think they're a little team, because I'm pretty sure from looking back on past stuff, there was different narrators, and it's I think he is actually penning the stories and whatnot, but there's definitely a kind of branding to it all, which is fine. I don't know if the stories are any good. Obviously the Critical Drinker is someone who writes, but I look at the covers of his books and I think that looks like outer airport trash, he writes
like Tom Clancy type of shit. The thing I was trying not to write. Yeah,
exactly. And it doesn't really surprise me that he writes stuff like that, like when I see his reviews and things, and it's like, it's definitely a genre kind of thing, and I'm sure they're fun to read, but they're not the type of thing I would be trying to gear towards. So for authors such as ourselves, who kind of, I guess we're just transgressive, maybe a little bit unorthodox in some ways, or at least I would say gritty realism is kind of what it is. It's kind of like, there isn't this fantasy stuff. It's not sticking to a trope, say sci-fi or whatever, but it's obviously going to have a bit of a mix of these types of things, and it's still going to have plot points that are very akin to your standard hero's journey kind of tales or action and adventure and whatnot. There's so much crossover that it's difficult to tell. But to actually advertise yourself, I don't know. I don't know. I think what I've done has helped a bit, but I definitely think it's hit a plateau in recent years. I would do things with a bit more foresight, I suppose. If I could nowadays, I'd definitely think on doing things a little bit more instead of just feeling like, oh, I need to do something and then just going with it. But I think it's my own background, especially in acting on film and things like that, that has definitely inspired me to actually learn how to edit films, because I just, I love movies, and whenever I write, I'm trying to make it as cinematic as I can a lot of the time. And yeah, I mean, I'm satisfied with the level that I'm at, and obviously I still want to improve and whatnot, but I'm still at a loss what I should really do with it, because it almost feels like a kind of needless skill. And I do wonder whether maybe if I just concentrated on writing, I might have actually got somewhere with this. But I don't know. I think the times we live in kind of demand you to have skills in multiple areas these days. So if you're a good schmoozer, going to events and stuff like that is a good way to potentially get in with the right people when it comes to writing. That's for sure. I think James on the last one said build an email list. I can see the definite benefit of that. It's not something I've really tried to do that much, apart from through fraud mainly. But yeah, I haven't really ever tried to do the whole, I suppose, I mean, in a way, your monologue kind of podcast, in a sense, if you were doing that for an email list, that might be the better way to do it in a way. Because it's like, if you just, because imagine if you had 100 people actually listening to it every week, and you could just mention your book at the end with a little pre-recorded ad. Little things like that, I think, might be a good way forward. But it's getting that list, and then you've got to have a website. You've got to maintain the website. It just, one idea basically avalanches very quickly, I find. And before you know it, you're writing blog posts and putting articles on Medium or all this stuff. And then it's like you're not really doing the novel, are you? You're just doing all the shit that makes you feel like you're a writer instead of doing the actual writing that you claim to want to do.
Yeah, when 2 years ago when I was in Australia and first connected with you and the other bastards and podcasting and stuff, it was, as you mentioned before, kind of a real social outlet, because it was still kind of COVID era. I was kind of shut in, and but then moving over here, I just had a tumultuous period of time where I didn't have enough time to do all that other stuff. So I pushed it to the side, and I realized like my life kind of got simplified, where it's like, well, I can just keep working on my book on my own time, and I don't have to kind of feed the beast of the content machine. And I feel like I'm really just I'm trying to focus on creating something really good. That's why I, went back and educated myself about story structure and tried to skill up there, because I feel like that was a missed opportunity when I was at university. Because the example I think of is before Quentin Tarantino made Reservoir Dogs, he worked in a video store. What was it, like 5-something years? And you can imagine what he was like as like a 20-something at a video store, chewing people's ears off and giving them recommendations, right? But at that time, he would have just been the kooky guy at the video store, where I'm sure he was heaps of fun to talk to, but no one's going to pay him for his time to talk about movies. But now, as soon as he made Reservoir Dogs, he could, and the era was shifted. Let's say it was you could podcast in the 90s. Then he would have instantly had hundreds of thousands of people sign up for his podcast the moment it dropped. And you see it on YouTube now. I think he has done a podcast recently with some other film critic, because he is he's a filmmaker and a film critic, but people didn't give a shit about his film criticism until he made a great movie. And people on a mass scale, I'm sure his friends and the people in the video store. So I guess I'm really just trying to think of things in that perspective as well, is that like, these things are easy to do. These low barrier to entry Zoom calls, Skype calls, you know, everyone thinks they've got interesting opinions, but generally people are going to care about your opinions if you've got like a body of work or some interesting, you know, hit behind you. So that's really where I'm at with things, where it's like, why fucking bother with stuff? I feel like it'll just make obvious sense what the kind of like nurturing the audience thing will be, what the right kind of method to do that will be after I've created something good. Maybe that's like a simplistic way of looking at it, but and of course it is kind of, I am just putting my blinders on. It's pretending that no, the cream will just rise to the crop and it'll just people will magically find my book. But I don't know. I just feel like I'm not so much of a fame whore where I need it to all coalesce at the right time. And I'm writing this great book and I'm building my audience. I'm just like, fuck it, man. If I can create something that I'm going to be proud of in years to come, as you mentioned, then cool. And yeah. And then if an audience comes from that, great. If not, whatever.
Has it changed your perspective on how you're going to put books out? Is your approach to that going to change, or is it going to be the same as before? You're going to do it off your own back, or you're going to look for publishers or agents, anything like that?
Yeah, no, my position really hasn't changed. Self-publishing is good for me. Just the freedom, creative control is really important. I've done a bunch of research in terms of how traditional publishing or kind of more niche small press publishing works, and personally I don't think it'll work for me. And yeah, I feel like if I'm not bothering myself with a monologue podcast that no one's listening to, I've got more time to actually do a good job with self-publishing. Because as you know, if you're going to do it properly, you got to like figure out a few things. It's not just like you write the manuscript and then it goes straight on Amazon. So I enjoy that part of the process, kind of like trying to figure out what would look cool on the cover, how should it be formatted. I feel like that's kind of if I'm the one writing the book, there's no one better placed than me to figure out that type of stuff. So I like the ownership and control that comes with self-publishing there. And yeah, I guess the caveat would be that like I'm not just, you know, completely against traditional publishing, because who knows, it might change. It might become fairer for authors. The cultural landscape might change where more kind of racy material is in demand on that side of the aisle. So who knows what will happen, but that's one thing I'm pretty happy with how I did the first novel, is I think I did a pretty good job of putting it together and doing it myself. So I'll do it again.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think you, promotionally speaking as well, I thought you did a pretty tip-top job, because it's fucking hard. It's not easy. And if you are trying to do it, especially with like keeping a budget in mind or doing it for nothing, then it's a graft, basically. Getting someone to read your book in general isn't easy, let alone review it, share it on their website or podcast or whatever. And trying to having a little bit of a book launch is kind of fun as well. It's kind of like a nice little period, even, you know, it's not going to be fireworks and cash and pussy, but it will, I don't know, it's satisfying. It's nice. It's a nice little end to the journey, I kind of think, even if it is low key, you know, because really, once it's out of your hands, it's out for the, you know, if the world takes notice of it, then so be it. But, you know, then it's done. So
let me tell you about my one experience doing some type of event with a book. You remember Sean McCallum in Canada, who wrote, so he wrote a book called The Recalcitrant stuff of life. He was on GC's old podcast, and I was around it. Yeah, I'm sure he'd do it. Yeah. And so we wrote similar books. His was about some gringos rescuing their gringo friend in Peru. Mine was set in Medellin, dirtbag gringo digital nomads. Lots of content crossover. So we became buddies, and a couple of years ago, and then I found out I was moving to Atlanta 2022, and I've got a really good friend up in Toronto. So I said to Sean, I was like, I want to go see my friend after I get to the US, and why don't we try and do like a little event type of thing where he'd already had a book launch. I didn't have a launch, but he's like, you know what? I've got a buddy who's got a tiny music venue, and I reckon I could get some people there. And I was like, well, I only know one person, but I'm sure he'd invite a couple of his friends. And so anyway, we figured it out. We're like, we'll put a date on the calendar. He booked his mate's bar, and my friend who lives up in Toronto, I met this other guy through my buddy who's a copywriter. He works as a professional copywriter in Toronto, and he's kind of a theatrical guy. He's done like stage plays and stuff. I'm like, he'd be a really good MC for this event. So I hit him up and said, will you be the MC? And he's like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So we figured out all the moving parts. About a month after I moved to Atlanta, I flew up to Toronto on a Friday. I haven't seen my good buddy, Kenny, for several years, and he's had some like tumultuous life changes. So we had like a really intense, as it was for many people, like COVID in the middle, like what the fuck has happened with your life thing on the Friday. And we had one of the most debaucherous nights of my life, like tons of drinks. His friend had sent him some acid in the mail. So we took acid on like after we'd drunk so much already. And it got to the point where we were high as shit, communicating telepathically with one another. Like we went into one bar, 2 a.m, and just the vibe was bad. And we just looked at each other and said, it's time to leave, without saying a word, and left. But we hadn't paid the fucking bill. So the lady was running out with the bill. So it was a nightmare this night. But we got in at like 5 a.m. and hungover all day. So the event, the book party thing was on the Saturday night. And because I'd gotten so fucking trolleyed the night before, I was so cunted the night before. I was actually in a really good state of mind for the event, because I was basically just so depleted chemically. I was completely neutral. I had a couple drinks when I got there and saw Sean, and I was just like very kind of placid, but not nervous at all, because I was just like, oh, this is going to be easy. All of Sean's friends arrived. The MC arrived, and the MC brought his girlfriend, and I got introduced to her briefly before our little reading thing happened. And it turns out she's like a book person as well. She does like feminism literary studies at a university. So again, I was too depleted to kind of like see what might have occurred later. At this point in time, I was just like, oh, nice to meet you. And so the reading part was we kept it really short and sweet. The MC did an intro. Sean read 5 minutes, answered a few questions. I read 5 minutes, answered a few questions, and we were done within like 30 minutes. The mistake Sean made is that I was like, I've only got 5 minutes. My book is filled with filth, but I don't know these people, right? And so I'm gonna pick a part at the start where you can kind of sense the protagonist is a bit of a scumbag, but he's more just kind of like figuring out the new city, and there's some racy internal thoughts, but nothing too crazy in terms of happening externally. Whereas Sean went the opposite route. He picked like a really kind of sex and drugs and kind of passport bros acting like pieces of shit in the wild, which was kind of funny because his mother, both parents were there, and like his family and friends and stuff like that. But they knew the novel, and the irony of his is that our novels are very similar, but his has got a lot more heart, and it's kind of like a kind of like a positive. His is like the light, and mine is very much the darkness and kind of the most heinous shit everything that can go wrong will eventually go wrong type of vibe. So, but we picked very different styles of excerpts to read. So the 30-minute reading part ends. We go out the back, and there's just like a little beer garden section, and then the MC's girlfriend, the feminism literary person, I think it actually started with me. She goes like, she said, I can't believe your characters listen to Joe Rogan or something. I mentioned that he was listening to a Joe Rogan episode, and I was like, oh yeah, it's because he's a loose cat, he's kind of like just a dunce. So, I kind of just said, yeah, that's a part of the vibe that everyone was doing at the time or whatever. Yeah. And she, that kind of placated her, but then she turned her sights on Sean and just let Sean have it. And it was kind of the one thing I remember her saying to him was like, have you ever had sex before? Like basically like his description of the act of coitus was so outside the realm of reality that it offended her. But anyway, that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. She just then ensued, I kid you not, like a 3-hour argument in the back where me and Sean were involved initially, but her wrath wasn't aimed towards me because mine was way more placid, the part that I read. But Sean copped it for a little bit. But then Sean's friends really came into bat for him, and it quickly became bigger than our books. It became about like what's okay to include, what's kind of like examples of the male gaze and all this stuff. It got really heady.
Jesus.
And it was probably the funniest thing about it was that Canadians are so polite. It was funny watching them trying to have a disagreement while everyone was like, it was just so outside their comfort zone. And my buddy, the guy I stayed with, it was like one of those live music venues where if you're sitting in the beer garden, they've got like a TV inside. And so he said he was stuck in this like circle of people having this really tedious argument, and he could see me walk to the bar like high-fiving people and doing shots and like like signing books for people who are like buying my book, and he's just like stuck in this like politically charged Canadian argument out the back. So anyway, I really wasn't expecting fireworks or anything kind of interesting to happen because you're playing very much like a home game with that type of event but there was one wild card there. And I actually, in retrospect, it was awkward as fuck and kind of a bit tense at the time. But the next day I said to my buddy, I was like, that made it, there was some spice to the evening, and it actually gave it something as opposed to just like everyone patting each other on the back. So anyway, that was the event in Canada.
Yeah, that sounds like a bit of a blast, to be honest. I mean, if there's anything I'd like, something I've written to do, it's just to have this little book tour, even if you have to put it together yourself. And yeah, you're just doing little readings just to see, almost like doing stand-up in a way, I guess, just to see like how it stirs people up a little bit, especially if you're reading some of your more provocative stuff. Yeah, let's say. And also seeing it, I mean, if people are debating about it and stuff, it's definitely instigated something, stirred intrigue and things like that. So I do find it hilarious that it would be some feminist gender studies literature that would, I mean, that's just, it's so typical of, especially given like the novels that you're describing, it's just like, just literally like rage bait, isn't it, really? Just taking that, what does she expect kind of thing. And yeah, pretty hilarious, to be honest, and very, very akin to the times if you were doing the zeitgeisty kind of way of doing it. She'd be one of the characters in the book, potentially. But I think it was also, for me, it felt like, I think I have seen videos on YouTube of like Doug Stanhope arguing with people, not necessarily even on stage dealing with hecklers, but just like
at bars and stuff like that, having kind of like just like a fucking heated discussion. There's something really human and honest about that, and it's rare. Like what is that thing in London, Speaker's Corner or something, where it's always people yelling about whether it's okay to burn the Quran or something like that. That's kind of like the same argument every fucking time. But people just in a pub having a good old argument, it felt, as it was happening, it was almost weirdly nostalgic, because I was like, this never happens anymore. Everyone has their own team, and
I only get memories of childhood with that kind of thing, weirdly enough. Whereas like dudes in a pub just fucking ranting on about a football game or something, but it gets a bit heated. But it's,
for sure,
got a vibeness to it. So it's something alive about it, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like there were feelings being hurt, but it didn't cross the threshold of like blatant disrespect or violence or anything like that. So it was in the sweet spot of like, this means something, and people have very differing views, but yeah, it was kind of spicy, because I think that's what before putting the event together, I was kind of like, the reading as I've seen on YouTube and stuff like that, it just feels like a big fucking circle jerk, like it's preaching to the converted type of thing. So which it was generally, people were there and very supportive, but you've got a rogue one in the mix. And that's why I said it was actually cool for her to stick her neck out like that and actually voice her opinion, because it created some interesting tension. But yeah, it was sold a few books, got a good story out of it. So good times.
Yeah, sounds great. Maybe we should talk about that in the future, actually. I'd love to do something like that as well, especially if it could be a bunch of us. We could have our boxing match.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You know what? I think I'm too old for that now. I feel like I don't know about you, but like how I was probably, I'm 37 now.
I'm 38.
Agreed to that when I was 34, 35. Like my body, like just when I fall now, it hurt even in the last couple of years. So you can call me a pussy.
I think to work out more nowadays, but I'm just doing it just to try and keep in shape for my 40s. But at some point, I mean, it's literally like, I don't know why I'm doing it. It's like I'm, trying to do up an old banger at this point. So there's no, it's just keeping myself on. Maybe we could do three charity rounds, maybe.
Potentially, we'll
after we had a few beers. we'll do our own fight club for like a minute, and then call it a day.
Yeah, maybe we'll just get a fucking AI to recreate what the actual fight club would look, and we'll wear some big fucking pads, sumo suits for the real thing. So
Nintendo Wii fucking boxing match. That'll do it. But
I know what you mean about.
Maybe you can tell me more about the heroin next time, hopefully.
Yeah, sure. It's an okay story. It's nothing crazy, but a decent story. We'll save it for the next one.
All right, well, I'll close it with the gender swap question. If you could be a woman for an hour, a day, a week, a month, 6 months, a year, 5 years, or the rest of your life, and bear in mind you will be the age that you are now, which would you pick and why?
Sorry, refresh my memory. What were the timelines? An hour?
So you've got an hour, a day, a week, month, 6 months, year, 5 years, or the rest of your life before you get crippled in a car crash.
I'm gonna say a month, because I want the I want the cyclical experience. 30, because I want to know what that's like. As on this side of the aisle, you have to tread very carefely for a certain few days. I want to bleed, because I feel like that's some, if you maybe you're not getting that if it's a day or whatever. So I feel like a month would be enough, where it's like, okay, this is the just understanding that rhythm. Like apparently men do get man periods, which I'm open to. I feel like sometimes I'm just fucking in a shit mood, and maybe the moon is pulling my balls in a weird direction, and I'm unaware of the gravitational pull. There's some type of cosmic impact I'm unaware of, but with the women, it's way more pronounced. And so I feel like it would, surely that's going to help my creative process if I get to embody and experience a full cycle. So let's go a month.
Nice.
Yeah.
Like that. And yeah, well, any closing comments? Author Thommy Waite?
No. Well, thanks for having me on. It's
thanks for being on.
Yeah, I've been just with you streaming on Saturdays. It's always works out to be my like Saturday afternoon, and so like I throw it on for 5 minutes, and then I've got a 7-year-old, so then it's like, oh, I've got to go. So it's like I've had the most kind of disjointed updates from your content imaginable over the like, because sometimes you're answering a question, sometimes you're doing a movie review, so it's so hard to kind of like streaming has kind of changed content in such a massive way where it's like the audience kind of dictates the format. It's like this feels almost retro doing this now, where there's like, no one.
If I schedule it, it seems almost redundant, or like it's going against what I should be doing. But I persevere nonetheless, out of transigence more than anything. But
anyway, it's to do this because I feel like I actually get a proper catch up. And thanks for having me on. Looking forward to the next one. My book is called Any Day. Just a quick plug. The book's called Any Day You Can Die. I'll send GC the link. It's on Amazon. It's on Audible. And
that'll be the bid, of course. And
sign up for my sign up for my Substack. I'll include a link on my website, tommywaite.com, which is there's a problem with it right now. I got to fix it. I don't know what's going on. I'm using a new provider, but you'll find the Substack there. That's how you'll find out about my new book when it's ready to drop.
Yeah, well, hopefully I can get you on when you're about to put it out there, if not beforehand. And
perfect.
Keep in touch, brother. I'll see you soon. Bye.
My story starts here because it has to.
I'm not your fucking friend. Trying to be though. Trying to feel it, trying to be it.
Ce n'est pas mon problème, je